Thank you, councillors, staff and members of the public. I declare this meeting open at 5:30 and in doing so acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadandi Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. Just the announcement for myself, obviously the first formal meeting of 2022, so I'd like to officially wish everyone the best for the upcoming year. Councillors, we are all here and we have some declarations of interest which are in our agenda, and I have one further declaration of interest which is from Councillor Andrew on item 15.1.5 as an impartiality interest, as he is a councillor on BHRC. Is there any further declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Public question time. We do have some questions from Mr. Brian Redinger. I'm not sure if Brian's here. Haven't seen him. Those questions were printed in the minutes, CEO?
Questions?
Yes.
On the agenda?
Yes. They'll be in the minutes, yes? Yep, cool. Those questions and answers will be in the minutes of this meeting. Confirmation of the previous minutes, councillors. Could I have somebody move that? Thank you, Councillor Giles. Seconder? Councillor Quain, thank you. I'll put that. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 7.1.2, we have some advisory committee minutes there, a number of them. Somebody happy to move those for me, please? Thank you, Councillor Kozisek. Seconder, Councillor Smith. I'll put those. Those in favour? That's carried. Councillor Gassett, those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Moving along, we don't have any petitions or presentations, but we do have 3 deputations. Councillors Sian Oswick would like to speak to items 10.4.1. Those are approved. That's carried. Graham Amanda Machin would like to speak to item 10.4.2. Those are approved. That's approved. And Todd Brown would like to speak to item 10.3.5. Those who approve. Thank you. So for those people, when we get to your item, we'll call you to make your deputation. Thank you. Dealing with the agenda, councillors, at this stage, coming out for discussion, we have item 10.3.5, 10.3.6, 10.3.7, 10.4.1, 10.4.2 and 10.5.1. Is there any other that would like to be discussed? Councillor Steck.
10.4.3, sir.
10.4.3.
And I just want to make sure that 10.3.8 has been dropped off.
10.3.8 has been removed, Councillor Steck.
Thank you.
Councillor Gassett, yes. Sure.
So the confidential items will be dealt with after to take out?
They will be dealt with, yes. So effectively, councillors coming out or moved on block will be 10.11, 10.12, 10.31, 10.32, 10.33, 10.34 and 10.44, unless anyone would like to discuss any of those. No, if that's the case, somebody happy to move that they are moved on block. Councillor McCleary, the seconder. Councillor Andrew, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Okay, 10.3.5, deputation from Mr. Todd Brown. Thank you, Todd.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I am the Chair of the Economic and Planning Committee of the Bunbury Geograph Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to this item. Expanding the City of Bunbury rate base is obviously a major priority for our financial future. Over the past 4 years, this has been a major focus and resulted in the local housing strategy, which identified that to grow we need to look inward and create new lots through the subdivision of our existing urban suburbs. There are currently 379 vacant residential mixed-use sites. Going forward, to facilitate the anticipated growth, the housing strategy has identified a potential additional 7,300 vacant residential mixed-lot sites to come from urban infill. Through the great work carried out by the City in the housing strategy, there is a great opportunity to capitalise on this identified and largely untapped addition to our rate base. And I applaud the recognition of this within the recommendations through items 13 and 14, which read on page 34 of the agenda. Recommendation 13, the City continues to explore how the rate base can be expanded through new subdivisions, higher density living and multi-level developments. Recommendation 14, the City identifies the vacant land holdings and holds discussions with developers to identify if the City can provide any assistance. Clearly proactive and incentivising the process. However, item 4 leaves me bewildered as to the logic and appears counterintuitive to items 13 and 14 and the overall plan. Recommendation 4 reads, the City investigates how a higher minimum rate can be imposed on undeveloped land to encourage development of that land. I understand that this is only opening a conversation, but that conversation needs to be shut down straight away. And item 4 should never have reached this far if Bunbury is truly developing its brand that it is open for business. We are not a city like Busselton and that has an abundance of greenfield development sites being held by multinationals who do not care about their holding costs. We are talking about small mum and dad investors who want to downsize and take advantage of their big backyard. By imposing this higher minimum rate, you are effectively increasing a developer's holding costs, which is more than likely to result in a decision not to proceed with that development. Those potential investors will move the same project onto Eaton, Dalyella and Australind, where there is no extra holding costs or disincentives. Bunbury misses out. Item 4 needs to be taken out of the recommendations and its deletion was supported by the community members of the Community Reference Group. On behalf of the community members of that Community Reference Group, one who is here tonight, they've provided me with the following comments on the executive recommendations. Under recommendation 2 and 3, the Community Reference Group did not support the continuation of minimum rates and considered them clearly unfair and a regressive tax on cheaper properties. The conversation concluded as to whether we even needed to have minimum rates. Under Clause 9, the Community Reference Group did not support a blanket winding back of rate exemptions through legislative reforms, but agreed to discuss it. Under Clauses 10 and 11, the Community Reference Group believes the City needs to be careful that the community does not get the impression that the City is having a second go at charging community and sporting organisations. This exemption is an investment by the City in its community organisations. In conclusion, I urge you to delete items 4, items 9, 10 and 11 from the executive recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Brown. So, councillors, take a seat, thanks Todd. Councillors, as I foreshadowed last week, we have 18 recommendations here. We'll envision to do, as based a couple of councillors have raised a couple of recommendations already with me, that any recommendations you would like further discussion or debate on, we'll take out, and then we'll deal with the rest of them on block. So is there any recommendations councillors would like to discuss further?
Just to clarify, Mr Mayor, are you suggesting that we go with Mr Brown's suggestions first?
At this stage, if someone's happy to move all 18 recommendations, we can take that. If there are a couple recommendations that you're foreshadowing we pull aside, I would suggest doing that now.
Well, mine are actually in line with Councillor Brown's,
Sure.
well, former Councillor Brown, sorry, but as I mooted to last week.
Yep.
And but I am not really in support of removing 9.
Okay, so at this stage, Councillor Steck, would you like item 4? Which recommendations would you like to come out for discussion then, Councillor Steck?
As I mooted to last week, sir, it will be 4.
Yep.
And also, I wanted to discuss 5 because, as I mooted last week, I would like to know what is a significant community support level.
Sure.
What is the benchmark that says that is significant community support?
Councillor Steck, I'll just stop you there. We'll pull that out and you can ask that question at that stage.
Okay, number 5 then. I also think that number 7, I think number 10, I think number 11, and also 14.
Okay. 4, 5, 7, 10, 11, 14. Any further? Yes, Councillor, yep.
Sorry, can I just make a comment? I thought that these were just guiding principles, and surely when we decide to adopt them as a recommendation, they would have to come back before council for debate anyway. So I'm not quite sure why we're going through these individually when it's really just a guiding document.
Sure. So a guiding document, Councillor, yep. However, if this council decide that they don't want to even investigate one of those particular recommendations, then this is the chance to remove it now, so it won't be looked at. But I will just ask if the CEO has any further comments around that. Okay. Any further recommendations that we would like to discuss, Councillor Kozisek?
I would like to see recommendation 9 looked at more thoroughly
9?
also.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councillors? Councillor Steele?
I'm happy to remove the whole lot, and then we discuss, as Councillor Yip alluded to, that we can actually discuss further once these are actually back for our consideration, so we get more information from the staff.
So you would like to move recommendations 1 through 18, or the entire executive recommendations? Is there a seconder to that? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Steele.
As I said, I would like to have more information and speak to the staff when we have a briefing meeting on all these, and speak to, if they go out to then to public comment, and have more input from people as a speaker tonight. So I would like to take this further and have a look at all of them.
Councillor McCleary.
I see these as quite progressive, and I would like also to be able to have the opportunity to go in depth with it, because potentially I see the city being able to move forward with these recommendations, and so I think we need to really get down and chew the fat on them and come up with good resolutions to come back to council. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we have this recommendation moved and seconded. Is there a speaker against?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can we have clarification, because if Councillor Steele's motion is accepted, does that mean we're not accepting them, we're merely going to debate them further or in the future, or what's the...
Councillor Steele has moved that we accept this recommendation in its entirety, which has been seconded by Councillor McCleary.
Because I had wanted to remove 4 for further discussion.
Questions, Mr Mayor?
Councillor McCleary.
We will still have the opportunity to do that at a later time, and we can bring that particular question, that particular recommendation back to council on its own. Is that correct?
That's what you have seconded, Councillor McCleary, yes. So if Councillor Smith, in answer to your question, that this has been moved in its entirety, if you want to deal with them individually, you should probably speak against this.
Mr Mayor, haven't we all had a rating guiding principles briefing session?
Yes. Is there a speaker against the executive recommendation? Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, councillors, we have already had briefing sessions on this guiding principle. The staff have been very direct and very clear with the information that they provided. Recommendation 4, I've actually had, I've been on council when we did this, and there was no proof that this actually made people develop their land any sooner. And sometimes the market is just not ready. If the market's not ready to develop something, as a developer you wouldn't do it. So why would you make people have higher holding costs for no reason? I also find that in number 5, as I said, what is the benchmark for that significant community support? I think that that does require more work, and I've said that all along. I've also said all along what requires more work is the existing benchmark or a specified area benchmark that is for the whole betterment of the community, not just going down the path of making everybody have to pay in that specific suburb for something we do in that suburb, when it might be a regional facility. So, not-for-profits, well, we all know we lose over $1 million, maybe $1.3 million, Mr. CEO will probably give me a figure better than that. And I also don't believe we should be going after our sporting facilities and our community. I think that the volunteers do a wonderful job. So why would we want to double bite on the cherry? So, and for me, I guess we also need a benchmark, is to say, well, when we go into public-private partnerships, we need to be very clear and have a policy that would be developed prior, before we went down that path. Otherwise, you're opening a very dangerous can of worms.
Thank you, Councillor Stack. Is there a speaker for the executive recommendation? Councillor Yip.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I was part of the focus group that met with the gentleman here and with councillors and executive, and the idea was that all ideas were put on the table to talk about what other shires are doing, what's possible, what's palatable, and I think that's a fairly comprehensive list of everything that we spoke about. I thought the idea was, as guiding principles, that they've been put on the table for further discussion, and before they were put into play in the budget or to the ratepayers, I think there's a lot more work to do, and I think that was the idea, was to discuss them and have a lot more work done on them before they were accepted. So I don't think that the idea was to adopt these as to be true and going forward in the future. Thank you.
Speaker against or question, Councillor Gasser?
Question and also speaker against.
We'll go with the question first, I think it's good.
Okay. Well, there's a little bit of confusion from my point of view. So we're going to vote for this recommendation as it stands, and the recommendation is the council endorses the rating guide principles as detailed below, noting that these principles will be incorporated in the development of the draft 2022-23 budget. So I don't think the motion is to actually take it away and discuss it further. I think the intention of the motion is to take it away and discuss it further. However, the resolution is exactly the opposite to what they're saying.
Thanks, Councillor Gasser.
So,
I might just ask the CEO to answer that and maybe go forward on the process from here.
Seems to me heavy for me to turn my mask off to talk.
Sure.
Thank you. So the notes for the preamble endorse the rating strategy rating guiding principle as detailed, noting they will be incorporated into development. So we have to start developing the 2022-23 budget. Initially, that was around recommendation 1 and recommendation 2. All the other areas were justification and investigations to be carried out and brought back before council when council is in a decision-making process in accordance with setting its budget for 22-23, Mr Mayor.
Does that answer your question, Councillor
I
Gass?
still have a question. It really doesn't clarify anything. The resolution is what is adopted officially. It says it will be used in the development. If what the CEO said is correct, then we should be only voting on the first two and removing the rest for discussion. You know, we can't sit here and play games. This is a very serious budget.
Yeah, so Councillor Gass said that the motion has been moved and seconded. That's why we're discussing that now, and so we can either accept them all, or there might be a foreshadowed other recommendation if need be. But Councillor Gass, did you indicate you would like to speak against, or you've finished speaking against?
Well, I'd like to speak against, but I really still need clarification, Mr Mayor, because I don't know what I'm voting for here. Are we voting for that resolution or what the CEO said?
We're voting
Or
on
perhaps we ask the mover of the motion to clarify.
We're voting on the recommendation in front of us as it reads. That's exactly how it is. Councillor Steele, you
I'll
have a question?
just clarify. So 1 and 2, they say continue. The rest say investigate, consider. I think it was 8 and 9 also were continue to review, continues to lobby the state government. But the rest, what I can see, is actually that 1 and 2 are basically the ones, yes, we're going to continue to do that, but the rest are, let's justify this, let's investigate. I think those are the words. So we're not actually saying, yes, we're definitely going to go ahead with them, but we are going to investigate them. Is that
That's what the
how
wording
I-
says,
yeah.
Councillor Steele, yes.
I'll speak against it.
Yes, Councillor Gass.
Mr Mayor, thank you, councillors, for your patience. In fact, what the councillor just said is contradicted by, say, recommendation 9. The city continues to lobby. It doesn't say to investigate, to lobby. So some of these are very solid clauses. So I'll speak against this in that I would like to support some of this stuff, but definitely will not support recommendation 4. And at the last briefing that was raised, I've spoken to some of the reference group. This motion and the attached information references the reference group, or cites the reference group, that they have been very intensively consulted. However, they're here tonight telling us that they don't support these things. So I'm just wondering, I've put my 10 cents worth at the meeting, the briefing, that was ignored. The reference group is saying they don't support it. So where has this recommendation come from, for a start? Or why is it still there? Likewise, recommendation 9, a very solid recommendation. It's not an investigative one. The city continues to lobby state government for reform to the Local Government Act in regards to rate exemption under section 6.26G, very clear. I'm not sure who's on the receiving end of number 9, but I would envisage maybe charitable organisations, religious groups, St Vincent de Paul's. There was discussion about cost shifting, of course, about, say, public housing being shifted into not-for-profit organisations, and we lose rates on that. I would probably accept that. We need to look at that, but if we're going to start removing concessions to the not-for-profit or the charity groups, and yet the surrounding shires may have concessions, well, what's going to happen? They're just going to pack up and shift. So definitely that one I would like to take out. I can keep going, I don't want to take too much of the time. I would like to discuss 10 and 11 further because it's been raised by Mr Brown, who's a former employee of the Valley General's Office. Recommendation 12 is very clear. It's not an investigative thing. It says no further concessions. 14, it's a pity because I have to vote for this motion and against the motion. 14 is a fabulous motion. It's an amazing motion where we can go and talk to potential developers and see how we can assist them, incentivise investment and development here. And as pointed out by the delegation, that's negated by 4. So, Mr Mayor, I really think if we go past this, we're going to be actually accepting everything on that piece of paper, notwithstanding most of it, sorry, not most of it, but quite a lot of it is not supported by the reference group, and there's at least 4 items not supported by myself and potentially 2 others. Having said that, there's a couple of very good recommendations. It would be a pity not to take this forward without having to take those items out, at least discuss them.
Thank you, Councillor Gassett. Is there a speaker for Councillor Smith?
Mr Mayor, I don't wish to speak for, but can I make a suggestion that we change a couple of words that might satisfy in the first paragraph, that we add further debate and note these principles that may be incorporated into the development of the budget, rather than, because I understand what the pros and cons here. Don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but
looking for an
need to
amendment.
clarify that first paragraph. That's just a suggestion.
Could you just note what you mentioned again, sorry, Councillor Smith? So in the first paragraph, the council endorsed the rating guide.
Noting principles and further debate be taken to be incorporated in the development of the budget.
How you going with that minute, take it? Councillor Cleary.
Put discussion instead of debate?
Yeah, that's fine. Happy with that. Just a question.
Mover, are you happy with that to be included?
Yeah, but I'm just not, yes, but I'm also confused as to why people aren't, because these aren't set in stone by what I can gather, that they still will be coming.
Yep. So
But
Councillor...
I'm very happy to add that if that actually helps.
How you going there, minute taker? So Councillor Steele, as I mentioned before, and in answer to Councillor Yip's question, is that these are guiding principles.
Yep.
And if they are all recommended, then they'll be what starts to form a discussion. So the speakers against, from what I can understand, just do not want to see these items even remotely discussed in that discussion. So they don't want us supporting some of those recommendations to be part of that guideline principles.
But what can happen then, though, is though they are guiding principles for our people to set our budget, we might not like the outcome. We can then still vote against it. Is that's... Yes.
Councillor Steele, that's correct. However, obviously, for example, if we use one of the options, recommendation 4, about minimum rate, then obviously if that's not supported, that will not even be considered when forming the budget.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, further question, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Stepp.
Once we approve this and we start to have discussions in the background, won't it still be a key document that staff will rely on to develop the 22-23 budget?
Yes. Councillor Smith, is that what you're working towards? And mover and seconder, are you happy to accept that?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm just hoping that might resolve the issue of those who are concerned that once it is a bit ambiguous the way it's worded in the first paragraph of that recommendation. I understand what they're trying to say, but it is a bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a speaker against, in favour of this recommendation? Councillor McCurry, you've already spoken as seconder. Councillor Giles.
The cherry.
I've taken that as the motion because both the mover and seconder. Sorry, I was asking for someone to speak. So I've accepted the points added because both the mover and seconder are satisfied with that. So that will be the formal motion. Do we have a speaker for this? Councillor Plum.
Just very simple clarity, just wanted to make regarding recommendation 11, which is actually a reiteration that the city provides concession for storage units, TPS heritage rates and sporting and community groups. That is a concession that's currently in place, and this recommendation is saying it will continue to do that. So the City of Bunbury is not taking a double bite or further penalty on any not-for-profits in the local community. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against this. Councillor Steele.
Thank you. I think everything's been said.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll put the executive recommendation that is in front of you. Those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried, and those against are Councillor Miguel, Councillor Gassett, Councillor Turner, Councillor Steck and Councillor Andrew. That recommendation is passed. Okay, moving on 10.3.6. Councillor Andrew, you pulled this one out. Would you like to move this motion, or do you have a question, Councillor Andrew? Moving. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yip. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, I just wanted to pull this out, just highlight the fact that as a council, our main responsibility is governance, and this new document, and I'd just like to thank the staff for putting it together, brings together basically a document about our whole role as councillors. There is a lot of misconception out in the community about the role of council and our functions around governance and what we can and can't get involved with. So I hope that this does provide some clarity for elected members, staff, but also out for the greater, wider community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Yip. Good. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Gassett.
Mr Mayor, it's not really something I'm dead against, but I guess I'll use this as an example that there's already several documents, as well as the Local Government Act, that we can refer to. And I appreciate the report being done. But, I'd love, and I know there's a lot of talent within council. There is staff. They've done some very good reports. However, can we focus less on sort of, I suppose, bureaucratic reports and more on projects, things that we can help develop, help Bunbury build, attract people, attract investment. It's just that, to me, as I said, I'm not dead against it, but maybe I just send a message out. Can we focus the talent on building Bunbury? And perhaps, if someone wants to put their teeth to a report, how about we do a Bunbury 2050 vision or something like that?
Thank you, Councillor Gaff. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Andrew?
No more comments, Mr Mayor.
I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Councillors 10.3.7, which we have a number of recommendations there in front of us. I was planning on dealing with this the same way. If there are any particular items that councillors would like to pull out, I can deal with them that way. If somebody wants to move that we endorse this in its entirety, feel free to do so now. I'd like to move that. Thank you, Councillor Giles. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Giles.
Mr Mayor, I support this recommendation for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we did have a workshop on this a couple of weeks ago and went through this item by item, and people have also had the opportunity to add their recommendations in writing if they wish to before this meeting. Secondly, it is very clear that we have to come to some consensus, not consensus, but a majority for each of these items if we go through them one by one, whereas in fact those who disagree with any of these items are quite welcome and free to put in their own submissions, either individually or with another councillor or with someone else. It's open to everybody in the Western Australian community to do that, and I think our job is to put in what, as a council, we generally feel, and maybe item by item is not going to change any of that because we've had a general consensus at our workshop. Thank you.
Councillor Giles. Is there, who seconded that? Councillor McCurry. Is there a speaker against this recommendation? Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be putting in my own proposal to the Minister, and that's why I didn't put it in writing here before Council. I'm not happy at all with proposed 1.1. That is just so not thought through clearly on so many levels. And neither is some sections here of 1.4 when it comes to penalties and all sorts of things. You may remember, and some of you may not even know, but I have been through the standards panel, and I have been having charges against me that were found guilty, and I overturned them and were found not guilty. So this is just a key document that makes it very ambiguous for a councillor to defend themselves. I do not support it at all.
Councillor Steck, is there a speaker for this recommendation? Councillor Steele.
Hi, I support it all, but I do want to note that I vote against Q, which is item 3.3, because I have absolutely no worry about having our confidential items recorded.
Thank you. Speaker against. Councillor Giles.
Yes, Mr Mayor, as I mentioned before, I think people have the opportunity to put in their own submissions if they disagree with any of those, and I'm sure some people will, but in general I think this has been workshopped enough, and I think we should go with this, and if people want to write their own for individual parts of it, I think they should be encouraged to do so. Thank you.
Sorry, councillors, I did forget to mention there was a request to take motions 1 and 2 separately. So this is dealing with 1. Was that Councillor Gassett? Was that what you requested earlier?
What I requested earlier was I was going to introduce a...
Yep. So, sorry, Councillor Gassett,
yeah.
if you could take a seat, please, Councillor Gassett. Just to, since we have moved this, this is dealing with 1 and 2, and yes, scrap that. Okay, councillors, we're dealing with the exec recommendation 1 and 2. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Councillor Gassett.
Sorry, it's probably a little bit of confusion again from my part. What I intended was to, what you just said, to actually ask for...
Councillor Gassett, okay. One sec, sorry.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Councillor Gassett, that was an oversight there. That item is now dealt with, and we can't add an item 3 to that.
Okay, there was a notice on motion. And I'd really like a ruling on that one.
I've got a ruling.
Okay.
That item's now been dealt with. Councillors 10.4.1 and Mrs Oswick, Sian, sorry Sian, please come and make your deputation.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. I've been nominated to speak on behalf of my street some members can't be here today. Here to speak on the proposed Nenki Way development and raise concerns. Now, our first concern is the proposed cul-de-sac length increase that is noted in the guidelines, Appendix 10.4.1-F in the Appendix 4 of the guidelines. The quote is, Nenki Way is an existing cul-de-sac and currently is 130 metres in length. What is proposed is for it to be extended by another 130 metres for the total length of approximately 260 metres. Now, it says that's slightly over the 200 metre length outlined in the guidelines, but that's not just slightly over, that's nearly a third longer than proposed. The next of our concerns is the traffic impact assessment regarding the intersection into our straight Nenki Way of South West Highway. The traffic report has been used for reference, is from 2009-10 to 2014-15, and it appears to be a dated report going off the traffic movement data from within that time frame. The traffic lights on Picton Road causes big surges of traffic coming from the west, while from the east we have significant obstructed views from a curve on the road and also a property there being 1B Nenki Way. It increases difficulty in joining the traffic flow, particularly in the short period between traffic light changes. We're raising the issue with the assumption presumed within the guidelines on page 86, 4.4, that the Bunbury Outer Ring Road will decrease traffic volumes as Main Roads has declined to add another entry and exit onto our street, so it will remain a no-through road. A substantial amount of the peak hour traffic on South West Highway are actually workers either travelling into Bunbury or out of Picton and beyond. The anticipated Bunbury Outer Ring Road will actually have little effect in reducing traffic in this hour, and this area. This will have a detrimental impact accessing the Ninkie Way Southwest Highway, being a one-way in and out. We also have concerns with the bushfire management plan. Within the guidelines, that's Appendix 2, page 36, there is a diagram. I'm sure if you guys have access to that, it's online. It makes reference to a possible second fire exit towards the east of the development, but then Main Roads has clarified that we will not be getting a second exit whatsoever. We will only have a one-way in and out fire exit, and as Main Roads is declining, this guideline doesn't address the sheer volume of contractor vehicles, work site supplies, building supplies that will be required for the development in both the intersection and the proposed houses that they'd like to build. Will they be utilising the Southwest Highway exiting entrance, or within the diagram they have a proposed fire escape that's, they're mentioning putting in the end there, but will the building supplies be utilising our in and out entrance, or will they be blocking up that fire exit to keep things fine for us residents in accessing our street? We're also asking for clarification on how excess traffic during works will be managed. Our street is approximately 7 metres wide and resident properties border the road. We're failing to see where various vehicles, building supplies, machinery, waste receptacles, all that's entitled with a development, will be set up, stationed and safely be able to manoeuvre a dead end and depart that won't impact the daily movements of current residents, waste supply vehicles, deliveries, visitors and families. The guidelines don't propose an expected time frame for completion either. And lastly, we would like to address the report found in Appendix 4, 2.2 that found high to moderate levels of acidic sulfate soils found within the land that is to be developed. When air is exposed to acidic sulfate soils, iron sulfates in the soil react with water and oxygen and it creates sulfuric acid. This acid can be released into waterways and the surrounding environment and can cause significant damage to existing vegetation, building foundations and roads, which is exactly what they're wanting to put in that development, and also the existing dwelling that's already remaining on the street. It states in the guidelines that additional fill will be required prior to development, but some residents are inquiring if there will be further management during works, removal and transportation of the contaminated soil to protect the existing dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, there's executive recommendation in front of us. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Turner. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of the issues have been addressed in the appendices and they've replied to the residents involved. This is a development site, always has been, so there's nothing really to hold it back. Thank you.
Councillor McCleary.
Mr Mayor, I'm really confident that our planning department has gone through line by line, dot by dot, to make sure that everything is compliant, and everyone doesn't like to have a construction happening in their place, but once it's done, it'll be a big improvement for the area. So I hope people will consider not what has to be done. It's going to be messy, it's going to be dirty, it's going to be noisy, there's going to be problems, but then after that it'll be fine. So hopefully you will vote for it. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against?
Mr Mayor, can I ask a question, please? Can I ask, through the CEO, once it is approved, if it is approved here tonight, it goes to the WAPC for approval, and they may or may not suggest or make changes to that plan, is that correct?
CEO?
Through to the Director, Mr Mayor, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the resolution is that a recommendation, the Council makes a recommendation to the West Australian Planning Commission, and that we recommend, excuse me, Mr Mayor, should I start? And that the recommendation is approved subject to modifications set out in the Schedule of Local Government Modifications. That includes many modifications to the various plans that was raised in the presentation. The Council has a limited time frame to deal with structure plans. It's 60 days. When the various issues came up through the process, we went back to the department and asked for an extension of time. Because of the issues, we were told that the time frame wasn't going to be extended, that they would deal with the various issues subject to our recommendations in the schedule of modifications. So if the Council was to make this decision, it goes to the West Australian Planning Commission for a decision.
And CEO, just a follow-up question. The recommendation is for approval. If there was to be refused, would we need reasons for behind that?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, there would need to be reasons, and again, it's still a recommendation to the WAPC, so they would take that into consideration, but it may not be their decision at the end of the day. They still may approve it.
Thank you, Director. Is there a speaker against this? Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just going to start with number 6, which is main roads. They clearly set out in the report that they're not really in support of this development, structure plan application, for the simple reason the traffic impact assessment traffic count is out of date. It was from 2013 and 14 instead of 2000 or anything in the 2000s of 2020 or 2019. So there's a lot more movement and a lot more traffic on that road since then. So I am aware that that traffic count can be updated throughout the process. However, Main Roads have also said that they're not happy with the length of the cul-de-sac. And as I alluded to last week, I was very disappointed that we weren't provided further land holdings or land to the area that goes to the river, and it's only a creek. And I would have liked to have seen that road go all the way around, not actually back onto the highway. So I think that there needs a lot more work to this structure plan. And as I said last week, I asked the question, why isn't Council taking a lead role in this and having a look at the entire area to develop a structure plan, which is exactly what Main Roads is asking. And we do that all the time through our town planning scheme and our updates. So these are very key issues. They're very key issues. And, you know, we're not looking at our own structure plans and parcels of land in the city. Well, then we're not guiding one of our key principles in the debate we just had earlier on in growing our land base and our rate base. So I can't support it on those reasons alone. Thank you.
Councillor Steck. Is there a speaker for this recommendation? Councillor Yip.
Thank you. I feel like it is quite a contentious development, but I feel there are many steps to go with the Planning Commission to get this one right. And I think if we recommend it, it has a chance to possibly become a better development than what we see here, and for everyone to do better work on it if it goes further from here.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Gassett?
Not against, just a question.
Sure.
For clarification through you, Mr Mayor. We've had a deputation tonight, and that deputation raised some questions, and Councillor Steck's raised some questions. I wouldn't mind having some feedback through the CEO regarding those presentation and questions raised by Councillor Steck, please.
So your questions around some of the comments made?
Yeah, the presentation, definitely.
Yep.
I feel that they've taken the effort to come in and done the homework and asked questions, but we've ignored it. I'm not saying I'm voting against or for at this stage, but I'd like to hear the response, please.
CEO, could you ask the Director to potentially provide some feedback on some of the issues that were raised and the comments made around the submissions that the City has made?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, so I'm not quite sure. So Councillor Gassab is seeking a response to the submission. We don't, I guess the normal protocol is we don't normally enter into a debate or address the submission. The questions are for Council to take on notice as part of their debate and for them to have done their research and the documentation has been provided to them in order to make a decision. So, sorry, just then to clarify, you'd like me to address?
If there was any comments around some of the planning matters that were brought up.
I think it's actually against the Act that staff actually enter a debate and give their advice in that way, actually.
Councillor Steele, I'm taking as a question from Councillor Gassab too. Was there any particular point that you would like the question on, Councillor Gassab?
I think there was about acid leaching and that sort of stuff that the presenter made, also Councillor Steck's question.
If you could nail down a particular question, Councillor Gassab.
Yeah.
So the question
was regarding, there was comments about the soil quality and the acid leaching. I think there was comments about fire management. No, it's a question, it's affecting my vote, so I'd like it answered, please.
Is there able to provide any feedback on those 2 points?
I'd have to defer to Mr Barber. I think there is some documentation contained within the appendices now that addresses those matters. But I'm not sure if Mr Barber can provide anything more specific. But, if you can, please do so.
Through you, Mr Mayor. All of the, to my understanding, all of the issues that were raised in the deputation were included in submissions which are addressed in the various appendices in the Council report. And the proposed modifications in the Schedule of Local Government modifications address the need to update many of the reports, including traffic, fire, and standard practice. If acid sulfate soils is present, there will be a requirement for an acid sulfate soil management plan at the time of any development, depending on the circumstance of the individual property that was to develop.
Thank you, Director. That's kind of the answer I was looking for. Councillor McCleary.
So in my understanding is that this is not shovel ready yet, putting it in lay terms. This is a process that we're going through, and if we okay this, then the next step is for the state government to come in and look at it as well. So
yes.
I'm right with that, aren't I? I just wanted to clarify that with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against this? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I wasn't really prepared for this because I didn't think there would be any objections. Residents' objections were clearly answered in regards to fire, hazards and all the other queries by staff. As stated before, the staff only had a certain amount of time to address as much as they could. It is now going to go to the Planning Commission, where they will then address any other issues and take things further, and then be better qualified to make a decision on whether it's to go ahead or not. So I would strongly suggest you pass this so we can go ahead and get the decision made in Perth. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Steck, Steele and Gassab voted against. That recommendation is carried. 10.4.2, the proposed car park, and this is a deputation from Graham and Amanda. Thank you. Or just Graham, maybe? Thank you, Graham.
chose 3 metres because that's the normal planning rules, but because you're in a heritage area, that gets pushed out to 6 metres. I sort of feel if the carport moves towards our house another 3 metres, it cuts our front garden in half. You end up with sort of 2 gardens, if you like, and when you're sitting out at the front, you're looking at your cars, then you really want that. But I also take into account the comments from the council. They sort of said that the carport visually dominates the street space. So I've got some slides I've sent in. You've got them if you put them up for me.
Sorry, Graham. Sorry, Graham, my apologies.
Do you have the slides to put up of these pictures?
So this is looking at the front of my house, and I've sort of tried to make a few comments. The report that came back that said it would visually dominate streetscape. Well, if you look at that, there's a great big conifer bush tree thing on the right-hand side next to our neighbours, and also there's another tree growing right in front of our home. If you set the carport sort of 3 metres off the fence, it will be shielded from the streetscape. It will actually be hidden. Also, I've got a hedge there that's 2.3 metres tall. That takes you up to the top of the ridge of the carport. You go to the next slide, please. So that's showing the sort of an angle from our neighbour's side. Again, it would be well shielded, the carport. Also, to show you, if you just go to the next slide, you can see where my wife's car there, the Pajero, that's where the old carport was situated or located. If we keep pushing up towards the house, I think it becomes more visible from the streetscape. If you bring it back to the boundary fence, it'll be more hidden. I've also chosen the colours of the carport to sort of blend in with the local area.
Sort of a creams and greys. We've chosen the roof, a pitch roof, to match the other houses. So I think, I'd really like you to approve it at 3 metres. That's it.
That's all. Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much. Councillors, there's a recommendation and a committee recommendation in front of us from the Heritage Committee. They're both very similar. Do we have a mover?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Is that the executive recommendation, Councillor Smith? Thank you. And is there a seconder to that executive recommendation, Councillor Giles? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of the Heritage Committee, I believe it's my duty to support this recommendation. The committee looked very carefully at this. We understand that Mr and Mrs Manchin's house is 12 metres back from the street. Most of the carports in that street the bulk of the street are between 6 to 7 metres behind. And this proposal is that it's within 2.2 metres of the boundary. It's very difficult to knock back requests like this, but it is a heritage precinct and we can't keep setting precedents. We're concerned at the continual picking away at the heritage area, and soon we won't have anything left. So it was the committee's view, and we discussed it at great length, that it was not appropriate to put the carport in the position where the proponents want it to go. Do we really want a heritage area where you do look at a whole street of carports rather than houses? That's one of Bunbury's strengths. Some of them are beautiful heritage houses in this town, and we really must continue to work to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support that. I wonder, and when we have a heritage committee that works very hard on these issues, and if we have a heritage committee with such a strong recommendation followed up by executive recommendation agreeing with that, I can't see why we would want to overturn that. I think Councillor Smith is quite right. We do have great heritage buildings in Bunbury. I believe there was perhaps a poor decision made a few years ago with an adjoining property. It doesn't mean we need to make another poor decision now. So I would really like to encourage you to support the executive recommendation. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against? Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I just believe that we could actually have a look at the whole heritage area and in further development, because within the heritage style, colours and those all sorts of things. Whilst I thank the committee for their work, I would also allude straight to an example of Subiaco. Subiaco had exactly similar size lots, 12 or 14 metre frontages depending. You know, those houses were quite small, the carports were quite small, even they didn't even really have driveways. So at the end of the day, those houses in Subiaco now have been massively expanded within that heritage style look. And there's suburb after suburb in Perth exactly like that. So there has to be room for growth on each of the parcels of land within the heritage precincts. But there needs to be a more futuristic approach to the development of the area within the boundaries of heritage itself. So you retain that heritage look, the heritage colour and materials and so on. But even then, you can still utilise modern materials with a heritage look.
Thank you. Councillor Steck. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Gassett, question? Sure.
Mr Mayor, through you, there was a previous carport there that was demolished. Can someone just answer, sort of provide clarification of what occurred there? Was it for the sake of building a new carport, or was it... Does anyone have that sort of response?
I'm not sure we'll have that response, and we can't ask the proponents that, but CEO, does anyone have that response?
I don't have a response. I don't know whether... I see the director shaking his head, but I don't know if he has any information regarding the history.
Through Mr Mayor, I'm not aware of why the original one was demolished.
Thank you. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take on board, obviously, the comments by those opposing this motion, but with respect to Councillor Steck, I don't think you can compare Bunbury with Subiaco. They're two different areas. A futuristic approach in a heritage area, I'm afraid, will just destroy the heritage area. I mean, certainly we've got to protect it, and we also have to be fair to the residents who live in the heritage area, and I believe the committee has done that. There's a lot of historic problems with the heritage area in Bunbury. A lot of things happened a lot of years ago before it became a heritage area, and I suspect the garage might be a victim of that process. But we can't go back. It's a heritage area. We have to try and preserve it. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, the executive recommendation is there. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Gassett, Steck and Steele were against. Oh, sorry, Councillor Turner. That recommendation is passed. 10.4.3, councillors. This was taken out. Councillor Steck, do you have a question, or are you speaking against this?
No, I'm just going to speak against it,
okay,
sir.
No worries. Do we have a mover for 10.4.3? Thank you, Councillor Andrew, and a seconder. Councillor Turner, thank you. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, the opportunity to bring more business into the city and to diversify an interesting area, part of South Bunbury, offers great opportunities, and I wish the applicants all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder was Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just going to be a small cafe. The opening hours are limited, so it's not going to be open at night or late in the afternoon, and I think it'll fill a market for that area and help with business and utilising it. So, vote for.
Speaker against, Councillor Stepp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The proposed change of use does not conform to the town planning scheme, and we've been down this path before in which for years I've been trying to say we can't have two sets of rules. Everyone has to follow the same set of rules. And so if you want to change that particular usage, then change it in the town planning scheme. Make it very clear that they can have a cafe there, because this is a cafe, it is not a takeaway place. They even want to put 8 and 10 more tables in there. That, you don't need 10 tables if you're making a takeaway business. It's a cafe, and it certainly is. And if you look at what everyone else is proposing, or some of the comments, if you look through the parking requirements, it doesn't conform to the parking requirements at all. The car park across the road belongs to the school. All the other car parks down the street are not their property. The rules are you need to contain your parking on site. So that's what they need to do as far as I'm concerned. So by all means, open up a business in Bunbury. Happy for you to do that. In fact, I'd rather you open the business and trade fully and make all your food and everything in Bunbury rather than bringing it in a van from Donnybrook.
Is there a speaker for? Yes, Councillor Turner.
Does the school own those car parks?
CEO.
I'll defer to the Director for the detail on the car parking, Mr Mayor.
There isn't a proposal to use the school for parking. I think that was explained last week at the briefing session.
Can you speak up?
Could lean down a bit.
Through you, Mr Mayor. There isn't a proposal to use the school for parking.
Is there a speaker for? Councillor Yip.
As councillors, we are quasi-judicial, so we have the ability to, I guess, not make changes, but do things a little differently. The schedule of submissions don't really show any serious concerns by anyone in the community for that proposal. So I don't think it's neither here nor there whether the community wants it. I understand that we need to have rules, but sometimes those rules can be flexible to allow something that doesn't seem to be bothering anyone. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against?
Just a question, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Gasson.
Just on the parking, just excuse me because I'm asking questions, haven't received a 700-page report. Maybe I might have missed a word or two in reading it.
That's no problem.
So the parking, is there no intention to use the school parking across the road? Because in the report it's saying, it's referring to all those bays across the road. Are they? They're not school.
CEO, I'll ask you to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll refer to Bart, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The proposal requires 4 parking bays. The building already exists and it's an old building, and the officers have assessed that there is sufficient parking within the street that additional bays on the property wouldn't be required.
Follow-up question, Councillor Gasson.
Wondering why all these other car bays have been referenced in the documentation. That's all.
CEO, through to the Director.
Sorry, I couldn't actually hear.
Question was why the car parking bay is being referenced in the document.
I'll refer to Bart, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the applicant put in a number of statements in their application referencing other car parking bays. That wasn't taken into consideration by staff in their recommendation. They only took into account the bays in the street that are directly opposite the premises and felt that that was sufficient.
Can I just ask a question, Mr Mayor?
Certainly, Councillor Steck.
Well, I'm struggling to understand where possibly 8 or 10 cars can park their vehicles if they're inside sitting at a table.
That's probably a rhetorical question, Councillor Steck. Is there a speaker? Yes, Councillor McCleary.
I would like to okay this, but I am concerned, and I've electronically been reading stuff, and I can't remember or didn't see what are the opening hours? Because I know there's a lot of congestion there in the, oh, thank you. Yeah, my problem would be the 7 o'clock one, because also afternoon school there, they have the students dropped off there to go to their extra studies that they have there.
Is there a question in there? Sorry,
Yes,
Councillor
sorry,
Theory.
I'm getting confused. Not easy. My concern is that it's already congested. Is there a chance that we are looking at the traffic situation really well, extremely well, or not? Because I was wondering if there is some concern with our people in the planning about the parking there, not being able to have enough car parks. Is that really okay? I need to know, have that real assurance.
Sure.
Please.
CEO, how really well done was the traffic studies or traffic report?
I'm assuming it's really with 2 L's, not
Yes,
3. So
absolutely.
the staff have done their assessment. I guess we have a confidence in the staff to do the full assessment of the likely utilisation of the site for its use and for the times it's operated. If the staff had any concerns, they would have either made an alternative recommendation or provided further conditions to the recommendation.
Is there a speaker against? Where are we at the mover here? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'd just like to thank the staff for their hard work in bringing this, and also just to those community members who did take time to bring their comments and their thoughts to us. I think it is a very good opportunity for these kinds of things to be, brought out to the community and have people take the time to write back to us. I do wish the organisation well if this motion is passed. I do note that it is a niche market and that they are tailoring some of their offerings towards the drop-off and pick-up times around the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. I'll put the motion as it is. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Steck and Councillor Steele are against. That is passed. 10.5.1. Councillor Yip, you drew this one out. Would you like to move this motion, Councillor Yip? Is there a seconder? Councillor Andrew. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My children are 10 and 12 years old now, and they enjoy all the fruits of this natural world. But in 2050, they will have children of their own. Will they enjoy the clean air, safe swimming beaches, enough food and water for all? I really don't know. Globally, the Paris Agreement has specifically urged local governments to step up their efforts to reduce emissions and challenge the effects of climate change in their regions. Locally, the Local Government Act says council must use its best endeavours to meet the needs of current and future generations through an integration of environmental protection, social integration and economic prosperity. By authorising the signing of the Awalga Climate Change Declaration, we formally acknowledge a climate emergency and send a strong message to our community that a failure to act places an unacceptable burden on future generations. Will that be a financial cost or a livability cost? Who knows? At Council, by signing the declaration, we will have a framework to deliver actions to go hand in hand with our new Environmental Sustainability Officer and show the people of Bunbury that we're serious about protecting this amazing place we live in for years to come.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't put it as eloquently as Councillor Yip. However, the science is clear, and being a coastal community with waterways, inlets, canals, climate change has a real risk for the future of the city. And it is a fantastic opportunity that we get to make a decision here today which will have an effect on generations to come. Climate change is one of the very few areas that local government can get involved in that does have ramifications around the world. As we move forward with signing the Awalga Climate Change Agreement, we, together with other councils in the state and other local governments and other tiers of governments around the world, join force to say that we do want to move forward on reducing our climate impact. Finally, I'd just like to quote Councillor Yip, as I thought that this quote that came in today was quite prudent. "It's the year of the tiger. The tiger is brave, straightforward, born to lead, active, innovative, fearless and rebellious. In 2022, this promises a year of change, movement and hope. I hope that as a council we can fully endorse this agreement." Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Is there a speaker against?
Fine, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Gassett.
that's okay. But I'm open to be convinced to vote for it. Look, a couple of months ago, the staff prepared I have to say, brilliant report on the greening Bunbury strategy. It was very, very well put together, very well referenced, and also very, very balanced. And they've done the SWOT analysis, the pros and cons and everything. We seem to be here, should I put it nicely, being led by the nose by Wellgo and all sorts of things. And, report after report, adoption of this, adoption of that. It's almost that we get to the stage where Wellgo is a fourth tier of government. I'm happy to represent the community, and if there's a conflict between my community and between Wellgo, then I would go with the community. My suggestion here is that we've done a fantastic policy on greening Bunbury. 15, 16, 17 years ago, we weren't tied to anyone. We established the recycle processes in Bunbury, and we've won awards for that internationally. So by being beholden to some agreement, to me, I think it actually restricts our autonomy, takes away flexibility. My suggestion is actually what it said in the last meeting we adopted the council, where we adopted the sustainable strategy, and that is the council requests the Chief Executive Officer the City of Bunbury sustainability strategy for council consideration, including climate change actions and recommendations based on informed corporate net zero emissions. I'd be happy for the staff to actually prepare a document, reference it properly, research properly, where we can have input to it, right? Rather than this actually almost a childish declaration, I have to say. You might think I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I've explained to you. So we're involved in carbon sequestration over the next 60, 70 years, agreements to take about millions of tonnes of carbon out of the environment. So we've got a little bit of experience in that area. My suggestion is we've employed someone on council who's an environmental scientist, get them to do this and not go with this, just being led by the nose.
Is there a speaker for Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally concur with Councillor Yip and Councillor Andrews. I've been gardening on the side of Bolters Hill for more than 40 years. And by the way, I love tigers, I love felines, and that's a well-known fact. That's just for Mr. Barber's benefit. Anyway, seriously, I've been gardening on the side of Bolters Hill for more than 40 years. This year is the first year I've had to put shade cloth over the dahlias. Now, dahlias are a summer flower. They love the sun. This year I've had to put shade cloth over them because it was so hot, it was killing them. So we have to do something about the climate. I want to leave a clean, green climate for my grandchildren and their children. Unless we lead the way as a community and convince other people that this is a really important way to go, we have to pass this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Sure.
Can I just ask, why is it that there is no financial or budget implications? I believe that, I'll leave it at that. Why is there no implications to the local government for signing this agreement?
CEO?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, signing the climate change declaration will not have any financial implications on the city. The previous work that was mentioned by Councillor Gassab on the previous report, that will, when that comes back to council, that will detail any efforts and impacts and either costs or savings which will impact on our budget at that time.
Speaker against.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. Does anyone know if the federal government has signed this particular French declaration? And has the state government signed the French declaration?
Yeah, see.
Did I hear correctly say the French declaration?
Paris Agreement.
So, through Mr. Mayor, I don't have that information at hand, but we can take that on notice and get that information for elected members.
I just don't believe they have, sir.
Is there a speaker against? Councillor Yip.
I feel very strongly that this is an important step that we can take as a council with the resources we have in a rapidly changing landscape to start to make a difference. I understand Councillor Gadseb's reservations about it being a WALGA declaration. Darebin Shire in Victoria was the first shire in Australia to sign a climate emergency declaration, which has no outcomes attached to it, and they've done one thing in about 4 years. So you can sign any declaration you want, really, but I think this gives our staff a way forward, and there's nothing to say that we can't break away from that if we feel we have our own perfect model. So I would like everyone to agree.
I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Plum. That motion is carried. Councillors, we're coming to confidential items, but I'm just going to seek some clarification from the CEO whether we adjourn, considering our annual electors meeting starts in 5 minutes.
So, through Mr. Mayor, we could delay or defer the start of the elected meeting by 15 minutes if the council is able to get through the balance of its business. I think Mr. Galinsky has already indicated he's happy to go and tell the audience out there that there'll be a slight delay.
Okay, could I have somebody move? We move behind closed doors. The seconder. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Members of the public, do we need a movement for that, Mel, before we go any further? To delay the annual electors meeting? Thanks, Greg. That Council 1, pursuant to RFT 211222004, Street Pruning Services Panel, accept the tender from Firebrand Proprietary Limited as trustee for the Guy Badger Family Trust, trading as Abel Guy for the agreed submitted rate subject to minor variations to be negotiated. 2, authorise the CEO to negotiate with Firebrand Proprietary Limited as trustee for the Guy Badger Family Trust, trading as Abel Guy, in accordance with Regulations 20 of the FG regulations, subject to being sufficient funds available with the approved expenditure budget and the variation limited to 10% of the contract value. Number 3, subject to resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into a contract with Firebrand Proprietary Limited, trading as Arborguy, to provide the street printing services. And number 4, following entry into the contract, authorise the CEO to negotiate variations with Firebrand Proprietary Limited, the Guy Badger Family Trust, trading as Arborguy, to the respective contract, subject to being sufficient funds within the approved budget expenditure for the project or line item where a contract is greater than $100,000 in value, the variation being limited to 10% of the contract value. That's one. Got all that, Jacko? 15.1.2, the residential hard and green waste collection services to RFT 2122, residential hard waste and green waste collection service, accept the tender from Steam Proprietary Limited as trustee for the Group Family Trust for the price of $1.75 million, subject to minor variations negotiated in accordance with the Regulation 20 of the Local Government Regulations. Delegates power and authority of the CEO to negotiate with Steam Proprietary Limited minor variations in accordance with Regulation 20 of the FG regulations, subject to being sufficient funds available within the approved expenditure budget and the variation limited to 10% of the contract value. Subject to resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into a contract with Steam Proprietary Limited to provide residential hard and green waste collection services. Following entry into the contract, negotiation variations with Steam Proprietary Limited to respective contracts, subject to being sufficient funds available within the approved budget for the project or line item where the contract is greater than $100,000 in value. The variation being limited to 10% of the contract value. That was moved by Councillor Andrew and seconded by Councillor Giles. Yep. 15.13, RFT 2122 Whitnam and Simmons Street Roundabout reconstructions, accept the tender from Carboni Bros for the price of $266,558.80, excluding GST, subject to minor variations and negotiated in accordance with Regulations 20 of the Local Government Regulations. Delegates power and authority of the CEO to negotiate with Carboni Bros minor variations in accordance with the Regulation 20 of the FG Regulations, subject to being sufficient funds available in the approved expenditure budgets and variations being limited to 10% of the contract value. Number 3, subject to the Resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into contract with Carboni Bros to provide Whitnam and Simmons Street roundabout reconstruction. And number 4, following entry into the contract, negotiate variations with Carboni Bros to respective contracts, subject to there being sufficient funds available within the approved budget expenditure for the project and where a contract is greater than $100,000 in value, the variation being limited to 10% of the contract value. That was moved by Councillor Steele and seconded by Councillor Kozisek and accepted. 15.14, supply and installation of curbing paths, brick paving and limestone walls, moved by Councillor Andrew and seconded by Councillor Kozisek. Pursuant to RFT 121222019, Whitnam and Simmons Street roundabout reconstruction, accept the tender. Isn't that the one we just? Oh, sorry. For the price of 266,550. That is the wrong one. Yeah, it should be on here. No one was paying attention. Oh, that looks better. Executive recommendation that Council pursue to the supply and installation of the curbing paths, brick paving and limestone walls, accept the tender from Jetline Corporation Pty Limited as trustee for the Russell Lyons Family Trust trading as Jetline Curbing Contractors, subject to minor variations to the negotiated accordance with Reg 20 of the Local Government Regulations. Delegates power and authority of the CEO to negotiate with Jetline Corporation's minor variations in accordance with Reg 20 of the FG Regulations, subject to being sufficient funds within the approved expenditure budget and variation being limited to 10% of the contract value. Subject to Resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into contract with Jetline Corporation to provide supply and installation of curbing paths, bricks, paving and limestone walls, and following entry into the contract, negotiate variations with Jetline Corporation to the respective contracts, subject to being sufficient funds available in the approved budget expenditure for the project, a line item where the contract is greater than $100,000 in value and the variation being limited to 10% of the contract value. And that was passed unanimously. And the last one we dealt with was 15.1.5, the Bunbury Harvey Council request for member funds. This was moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Steele, and adopted. The Council advised the Bunbury Harvey Regional Council that it agrees to provide the requested financial support of up to $233,375 to assist in their business continuity for the months of February 2020 through to April 2022. Sorry, that was February 2022. On the equivalent waste split between the City of Bunbury and Shire Harvey in accordance with Clause 7.41 subclause A of the BHRC Constitution. 2, provide the requested financial support in the form of self-supporting loan funded from the Refuse Collection and Waste Minimisation Reserve Fund. 3, additional costs of disposing of city municipal solid waste in alternative waste facilities for February, March, April 2022 will be included in the February 2022 budget review. And 4, receives a further point as information comes available included in the future economic viability of the new cell. And that was passed. Thank you. It's a lot of words. That meeting is closed. We'll see you all next door. Thank you very much.